Welcome to this edition of the MDM Podcast. I'm Tom Gale. Our sponsor for today's program is MDM's Shift Conference, September 11th to 13th in Denver, which our team's gearing up for. Our core theme is about business model innovation, specifically how you, as a leader in your business, can shift your go-to-market model to engage with your customers more deeply, stay ahead of competitors, and drive profitable growth. Our sessions focus first and foremost on building a high-performance sales team. You'll hear from distributors and manufacturers of every size who are talking about how they're transitioning from traditional outside sales models to more adaptive hybrid selling processes. But shifting gears to make your sales team more effective doesn't happen in a silo. And that's why we explored the other key levers to how distributors are executing on business model innovation in 2024 in 3 tracks we specifically have built for this year: sales process, digital transformation, and data analytics. We have great sessions scheduled on digital transformation with AI deeper in the mix, of course, and definitely a key part of our agenda on how leaders are using it in very practical ways to improve their sales processes and other processes to automate and streamline. We've got a lot of great case studies teed up for that. And you can't pursue serious initiatives of any kind today unless you're moving the third critical lever for business model innovation today, and that's data analytics. I'm really excited about those 3 tracks as well as all of our main stage. There's a final piece here that I want to mention too that we're bringing into the mix, because you can't really innovate unless you're building a culture, and that's why I'm really excited to be platforming a session specifically on the main stage around how to build an innovative culture of the future. So we've got 3 outstanding fireside chats that we're about to announce with companies that have been working on all of these elements that I just mentioned. And so watch for more details soon. And for more information on Shift and to register, go to mdm.com/shift2024. And with that, our program today focuses on omni-channel sales and channel strategies to drive revenue growth, which my guest today will be presenting at one of our Shift track sessions. So I'm delighted to welcome James Dorn and John Gunderson of the Dorn Group, frequent contributors to MDM. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, thanks, Tom. It's great to be here with you and the MDM community.
Thanks, Tom.
So your session in September is going to showcase a lot of your research and experience in terms of some real-world examples, best practices, really focusing on joint selling initiatives, segment-specific programs. You're going to be getting into some nuts and bolts very much in terms of how distributors can move forward their efforts in terms of supplier resources, sales enablement, marketing teams, and really pull all these things together. Talk a little bit about that, and then let's dive into some of these more specifically.
Yeah, Tom, that was a great opener. And, big picture, our firm has been tracking a lot of the transformation that distributors have been making to their sales organizations over the last 5 years. And in large part, many organizations have gotten through their transformation where they've shifted around the bodies and the headcount and where people are. And a big focus right now is really optimizing the performance of those teams and of those sales structures. And there's been a lot of really new things that could help those organizations optimize performance, both in the use of data and the use of technology to really make those teams more effective in their overall sales performance. So we're going to be unpacking a lot of really unique tools, a lot of unique approaches to working with, in large part, your existing structure, but just getting more results out of that structure. And a big theme behind that is leveraging the assets you have in place. And one of the biggest ones is your supplier base. The suppliers today have gone through just as much transformation in how they go to market and the tools they're using. So there's really a big opportunity in distributors partnering deeper with their suppliers. That's one example of leveraging the assets you have, and even just across your selling teams. How can you help your selling teams establish more of a concerted focus and help them actually drive in a single direction to be more effective in how they actually are going about selling and driving revenue performance. So we're really excited about this topic because there's going to be a lot of really actionable tools and program examples that we'll bring to the table to really help distributors get their minds wrapped around what's possible today.
I don't know if choke is the right word, but business model innovation can be sort of a buzzword. And I think the real piece of that, and what we've been able to do, I think, at our conferences the last few years in particular, has been to really take a look at how distributors, particularly as the wake-up call of the pandemic kicked off, I would say, for most, there was a lot of people before, but really in terms of how distributors started to change their go-to-market models. And it's felt like, particularly in the last 2 years, after everybody got over and, in their own ways, adjusted, shifted their internal teams and a lot of structures and did a lot of work internally, it feels like in the last 24 months or so, there really has been a lot of work that just about every company has done in some form on changing their go-to-market model. And, there's no right answer, no magic potion, anything to that. But there's a lot of lessons out there and that we've been tracking, you guys have been tracking a lot. Talk a little bit more in depth about what that looks like. And either you or James, take that, please.
Yeah, Tom, I'll take that one because I think it's interesting how shift has evolved, as a person who's been to many shifts, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. Over time, more people they've kind of reset their inside and outside sales mix. More and more distributors are moving to specialized sales forces. So, if you were in industrial, you had application engineers and sales engineers before, but now you're seeing people have safety specialists and specific examples. And a lot of the public companies are, touting their sales specialization in each category. So that kind of work's been done. And the outside salesperson for a lot of distributors that is not specialized has always been more of a generalist, they know a lot of knowledge, they know where to go. The same with the inside teams. Now with the explosion of digital and how much information you have, they're using more specialists, but also as distributors, the marketing teams and the sales support teams are doing a much better job of reaching that specialized sale, end customer more effectively. And I think that's a big part of what Shift's about. How can you use AI and digital and sales specialization to get better every day? And we get a chance to work with a lot of distributors and manufacturers who are doing just that. They're thinking about it holistically, but they're really investing a lot more resources in specialized sales, kind of at a specific market or a specific product set.
Yeah, it's interesting. What are the critical constraints that you're seeing right now in the market as far as how people are trying to sell better?
Everybody's short on talent, right? So they've got to maximize the resources they have. There isn't hardly anybody out there who's like, the number of 25, 30-year vets who are retiring now grows every day. And so everybody's short on talent. So how do you build a better support organization to support your sales organization? And it's not a straight line answer for anybody that we talk to or work with. It used to be like, hey, here's my inside-outside mix. It was pretty simple. I want one outside manager or salesperson for every 2 inside people. Well, that's all changed, right? So what I think is really a big breakthrough is people are thinking about the end customer differently, and they're not just looking at what they sell them. They're looking at what the potential is, the size of the customer. What else can I sell them? There's been a realization amongst distributors that in the channel they serve, there's not always thousands and thousands of new customers to find, right? A lot of them they already know, have transacted and do business with on some level. They've got to maximize the potential, the share of wallet of each of their existing customers. And they've got to grow their small customers and take them away from other distributors where they're big customers.
Yeah, that's great, John. Yeah, just to add to that, John, I think one other constraint that we're seeing, Tom, is there is this segmentation across the sales team, as John mentioned, where a lot of highly focused, specialized teams are going after whether it's a vertical or a certain market opportunity. But these are small teams. They're not large teams for the most part. So there's really a constraint when it comes to scaling the effectiveness of those teams. And that brings into play, what John also mentioned, which is more of the support behind those teams. So you're seeing this evolution of, sales operations or sales effectiveness teams. They've always been there to some extent, just with different names, but those teams are becoming absolutely vital for being able to make these highly focused selling teams more effective in how they target, who they target, and then how they can scale their actual reach to the potential opportunities within their local market. So that's been a really big constraint that's being addressed, but it hasn't really caught up across all the distributors that we've seen. So major opportunity for those who are having troubles kind of scaling their operations, if you will.
What are some of the examples and some of the things you're going to be touching on in your session that you think are really moving the needle for some people?
I would say, just to add on to what James said, some of the examples we're going to be talking about is how to use data. And I know it's an overused word, but specific examples of how distributors and manufacturers are using data and pushing it to their teams or better supporting their sales teams to be more effective. I mean, I really think this kind of came to me on Monday. I was, down in an Atlanta Braves game, right, with my son. And I was sitting there thinking, the number of times a distributor sales team actually gets up to bat, right? Every year it gets less and less where you get a big opportunity to actually step in the batter's box and take a swing. So every year it's harder to get time with customers, legitimate time. So when you actually get in the batter's box, you've got to have data, a full presentation. You've got to understand their pain points. When you get a chance to come up and get an at-bat, you've got to be ready. And the number of times you're getting to come up to at-bat as a distributor every year declines, right, in total. So when you get that chance, you've got to come with data. And our session's really going to focus on case studies and real-world examples of how distributors are doing that. But the other thing you want to do is, how do you maximize your at-bats? How do you get more at-bats? So I really think of it as a baseball game as a distributor. You're only getting so many times to swing. You better be ready when you get the chance.
Yeah, I love that example, John. Yeah, and I think another one that we could throw in here too, John, is probably, we're seeing a lot of specialist teams like focused on, say, the renewables market or the aero market or industrials. These teams, Tom, are being assembled. There might only be 2 people on a specialist team, but they're targeting a very specific group of end users. And let's just say it's renewables. They're targeting this market and they're putting a lot of pieces together to add some value to this market. So they're moving upstream to try and approach these users earlier in the decision-making process. So they're creating value-added services to say, hey, we could be your partner to help you through this regulatory change, or we could be your partner to help you make this technology shift into whatever it may be. And they're adding a lot of technical expertise and guidance to that transition process or through that thought process. So they're no longer waiting for, somebody to come to them and say, hey, we're ready to install this product. We need to buy the product from you. They're actually moving up the value chain into an earlier stage of that decision-making process and positioning themselves as solution partners. So it's an awesome concept to be able to really create stickiness with high value customers. The challenge here is, how do you do that, and how do you do that at scale? And this is where we're helping a lot of organizations do this, but we're also bringing new things into the equation from a sales operations standpoint on how those teams can make the targeting of these end users more effective. So layering in data, even data from MDM, Tom, of, hey, who are the target customers we're going after? What's the potential size? That's a great starting point, but moving beyond that to layer in additional data. And this is where we're seeing really phenomenal things when it comes to using, technology to scrub and capture data from a lot of different data points from those end users' websites, from third-party data sets. And distributors are now capturing all that data into an actual database, and then they're using tools like AI to actually, synthesize insights from that data. And they're not doing it just today. They're doing it. They're capturing it today. 6 months down the road, they're capturing more data, and they're comparing that data set. Like, hey, what's changed? What are they talking about now? What could be relevant data points for these end customers? So the use of data and the use of technology to synthesize and tease out insights from that data, extremely powerful. So now these sales operation teams, they're giving that data to these specialist teams, and they're far more equipped to have a meaningful conversation with a lot of these prospects that they're doing outreach with.
Yeah, it's interesting, James. And the other angle on this is it's not just the big companies that are doing this. There's smaller companies that are putting more focus and bringing in talent specifically in data analytics support to first clean up their data. They recognize that's the first step. But then beyond that, starting to build out, and the tools out there, whether it's Power BI or whatever, they're very, I don't want to oversimplify, but it's night and day compared to 5 years ago in terms of what people can do and bring in. And honestly, there's a lot of YouTube videos out there, or LinkedIn Learning, or there are smaller distributors that are leveraging these resources, bringing in really smart people and extracting that kind of information and getting it out to the sales team. And that's been a big shift, I think, over the last 2 to 3 years, that I don't think that was happening in the same way. So there has been this big shift in terms of how people are at every size company and every sector, how they're starting to leverage the data to support and strengthen their sales capabilities.
You're exactly right, Tom. It starts at the prospecting, but it also moves further into the sales development process of, they're using these data points to even develop very specific pro formas of, here's everything that's happening in your local market. Here are macro trends. Here are these other data points that will produce a very personalized business case for a specific user. And you're able to process all of this, much, much faster today, to where you can be very relevant to your end customers that you're targeting.
Tom, one thing I would add to what James said in your comment too was, a lot of times being nimble and quick and making a quick determination of what I need to change, or where can I add a specialist, or how can I reconfigure. Shift, when you go to Shift, you meet distributors, big and small, who are, it doesn't matter their size, are nimble. Technology is so much easier to use. They can make quick pivots. And I think that's one of the most fun things about going to Shift, is meeting people and talking to them, in the hallways about, what are you doing, right? And, it doesn't sound like, you may think, hey, a power distribution distributor doesn't have a lot in common with an electrical distributor. They do, similar channels, similar approaches. I think that's the greatest thing about Shift, is how everybody's using data, AI, digital, to just dial in the precious sales resources they have even more every day. And that's what's most fun about the event.
As we wrap up, I want to get your takes on, as you take a look at the current market cycle and 2024, what's different now, and where do you see those distributors who are really differentiated in terms of how they're creating their value propositions? I mean, I know you've touched on it a little bit, but can you both just articulate a little bit how both of you are seeing that develop this year? Because that's going to be a big focus of overall the conversation in September when we're together.
Tom, I would just say that, kind of reiterate some of our earlier points. People are really getting targeted on how they're using the resources because they know they're limited. The market actually looks like it's going to be pretty good in the second half of the year. So a lot of distributors are strategically like, now what am I going to invest? How am I going to set myself up to grow in 25? So how can I close 24 great because things look better? But then how can I set myself for supercharged growth in 25? That's where I think you're seeing a lot of thought. So people are already looking ahead to 25 because 25 after the election looks like it's going to be a pretty solid year, according to MDM Analytics and the forecasts. Oh, how do you set yourself up for 25 to go out and take share? I think that's what everybody's talking about.
Yeah, Tom, I think, as we're looking in the second half of 2024, distributors have really done a good job of trying to position themselves as solutions partners. In many cases, they're not pushing a single product or the availability of that product. I think the distributors who are winning out there and taking market share, they're going deeper into the challenges of their customers, and they're solving pain, or they're bringing solutions to them. And I think that's where we're going to see more of that moving forward, is trying to really position their offering around how they can help their customers in bigger ways with their businesses.
Gentlemen, I look forward to being with you in September in Denver and a great conference once again. And thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, it was great to be here, Tom. Thank you for the opportunity, and we're looking forward to seeing everybody at the Shift event.
Thank you, Tom.